Hello and welcome. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated many trends, including that, of course, of innovation and the sheer response to finding either a cure or a vaccine, and particularly a vaccine where the efforts have multiplied across the world. Now, the question is, even as pandemics like this hit us, what is the kind of research and innovation that's going in to produce the solutions the world needs, and is the pace sufficient? And perhaps this is where initiatives like the Grand Challenges come in. And the Grand Challenge is really something that brings together initiatives that foster innovation to solve key global health and development challenges. But to discuss this in some more detail, I have the pleasure of being joined by Trevor Mundel, President of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Trevor used to be earlier Global Head of Development with Novartis, worked in clinical research at Pfizer and Park Davis. He's also a medical doctor with a PhD in mathematics from the University of Chicago. Trevor, thank you very much for speaking to us today.
My pleasure.
Right. So, tell us first of all, how do you, or rather, what happens when a doctor also is a mathematician? So, what really rules in this case?
Well, I have to say, Govindraj, that a lot of the work now in the biomedical sphere has taken a data science turn. And often it's a question of looking for targets and looking for new opportunities in terms of therapeutics. It could be vaccines as well. And that comes to dredging through a lot of data. So certainly having some background in analytics is very helpful. And to the extent that I may not be a frontline practitioner anymore, I am able to keep my teams on their toes.
Right. Okay. So tell us about the Grand Challenge convening. I mean, how is it different this time? We obviously know what's different this time, but how are you seeing it from your perspective?
Well, this Grand Challenges enterprise has really evolved, particularly with the meeting that we have once a year. So we've shifted that around different parts of the world. We were in Africa and Addis Ababa last year. Before that, we were in Berlin in Europe, and we've been in India before. This meeting this year was intended to be held in Delhi, but unfortunately, with the tragic circumstances, couldn't be held physically in Delhi. So we had an online version of the meeting. And I have to say, as I've seen over I've been with the foundation now almost 9 years. There's been a tremendous evolution of both this meeting and the Grand Challenges enterprise. And I think that it probably is one of the premier events when scientists across the global health enterprise, across the globe, get together in one place. In this case, this year it was an online place. So we were a bit distributed. But really get together not only just with the scientists, but a lot of policymakers come, regulators come, often government officials within the country that we hold the meeting are in strong attendance. So it's this intersection of people with an interest and a passion for global health getting together.
Right. And the Grand Challenges effort supports innovation by offering grants, by obviously catalyzing the system of innovators and scientists and researchers. Tell us or walk us through the over 3,000 grants that you've given. When you look back now, what does it really unpack into? What has it done? What is it doing?
Well, it kicked off with an initial 14 grants back in 2005 now. And those were substantial grants around 14 different topic areas. I'll highlight one of them, which was called Target Malaria, which actually ended up as an effort to actually attack the problem of dengue infections via vector control. And that actually, in the last 2 years, has delivered evidence that using these bacterial infected, Wolbachia infected mosquitoes that replace the normal Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which are the main vector for dengue, by releasing them locally, you can somewhat dramatically drop the incidence of the diseases spread by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which include, dengue, chikungunya, Zika. And we had some studies in South America and a study particular study in Indonesia, which looked very positive. So that enterprise now is actually developing a model whereby it can distribute this to countries that have got a dengue problem or other diseases also related to the Aedes mosquito. So I would say that for that initial investment, that alone, to my mind, is a great justification. Since that time, we've made about 25 other grand challenges of the larger grand challenges, and then about 110 of the what we call grand challenge explorations, where you can write a very short application and you might get $100,000, a few $100,000 to explore your idea, with the prospect that out of the new ideas that come out, we can then go to a second stage where you could get more substantial funding. And what I've actually been interested in is in the last 3 years, what we've tried is at the meeting itself, as we had this year, I've been able to put out what we used as a call to action. So I've not been completely satisfied with the notion that people just get together in a meeting and talk about problems, but what can they do to solve them, particularly in a collaborative way. So we have these scientists from diverse countries across the world at a particular venue. Can they not come up with some new ideas for collaboration around some of the key problems that we face? So we announced this year, for instance, that if you have your own idea, we would give you a $100,000 grant if selected to explore that idea. But if you have a collaboration with somebody else from a different part of the world around an idea, we would give you $200,000 to explore that idea. And we'll see in December. I'll be excited to read what ideas came out of this meeting of real solutions, as opposed to just we got together and debated things.
Right. So as you look back at all these ideas that you've now catalyzed, what does it tell you about the role of a catalyst in something like this? And we're talking obviously about healthcare and medicine.
Well, you know, what I found is that there is this tremendous passion around the world for global health problems, for problems that impact society at large. And there are a lot of scientists, it may not be their main direction. They may be doing research in some other direction, but they think about these problems. And the barrier to them really applying their ingenuity to these set of really societal problems at large is that they often don't have seed funding because they are not experienced or they don't have a track history in that particular area. So by giving them that seed funding, my intention is that we can lure all of the best scientists working in whatever areas to come into the global health enterprise and solve these societal problems.
Right, and when you look back at the proposals, and you've given us one example of fighting dengue, what are the other common threads that you see amongst amongst the proposals broadly, and how do you see COVID-19 as something that either was anticipated or likely anticipated?
Well, so because the proposals are very much focused at in many cases, near and present problems. You see a lot of practical issues that they raise, whether it be around new methods or faster methods for manufacturing vaccines, whether it be around data sciences applied to the burden of disease. In 2018, we had some dual grand challenges between India and Africa. So a type of South-South collaboration around data science, and the other one was around antimicrobial resistance. So, you know, would people be able to analyze that problem with new ideas and also potentially think about solutions? So for this year, we would have a grand challenges exploration. These are the smaller grants that we make, whereby people have a propensity to want to delay in capturing new tools just because they may be expensive or they think that they're not available. This is particularly true with sequencing. So surprising to people, there's a lot more sequencing capabilities available now. And some of them have been our investments, but there have been many other investments in Africa. And we've got a grand challenges exploration around, do you have a new idea of how you can capture next generation sequencing for advancing health?
When you look at data science, how do you see that how do you see that contributing to the way innovation happens in health and medicine, and including to the point that you first started with, saying that your own training at a different in a different era perhaps is actually proving useful today, and do countries like India or young people in India, do they have an opportunity here which they perhaps didn't have to pitch for projects and build new collaborations?
Yes, indeed. I do see the data science applied in the right way as very foundational to our enterprise. And it gets to the issue of, if you don't have a good landscaping of these set of problems, the burden of disease, how that is differentiated in different countries, and not just in different countries, but subnationally. Even in India, there's great divergence between different states. And if you are not aware of the risk factors that are differentiated between different regions, then how do you intervene rationally? Then you are really just going in blind and assuming that one region is the same as another, which is a complete mistake. So I would say one of our biggest investments at the foundation, certainly since I started, has been in improving data science. So understanding at a very local level, from primary data as much as we can, not just extrapolation and models, what is the burden of disease and what are the local risk factors, so that we might know how to best intervene.
Right, and let's talk about vaccines. I mean, we all know where roughly the world is in terms of rolling out vaccines. Different countries are at different stages. What's your sense on the effort so far, and what more needs to be done to either speed up, but also ensure that whatever is finally rolled out or being rolled out is safe?
The vaccine enterprise, has really shocked me, I would say, in a positive sense. And we are now getting to the phase where I think in the next few months we will get some readouts from the leading vaccines, in terms of leading in the sense of having started their phase 3 studies a little bit earlier, whether they actually are effective, and we'll get the first read on safety. Probably first out of the gate will be the mRNA vaccines. And then the others in contention would be, for instance, the Oxford vaccine, Oxford AstraZeneca, and Serum Institute vaccine, in fact, where we may get some data as well. But if you think about that enterprise, so we're now in October, maybe it's November sometime when we start to see what's happening. And this enterprise really started in March. So, the concept of a vaccine going from scratch, from design of the epitopes, the antigen, to something which has completed a substantial phase 3 study in 8 months. If I'd have told you that 1 year ago, that was even vaguely possible, you would have said I'm crazy. So I do think we've seen a sea change in the vaccine enterprise of what is possible. And we really have to capture these learnings. We've been struggling with vaccines for tuberculosis, for malaria, for HIV/AIDS for years and years, on timelines that seem to stretch for decades. Was that really necessary? And I know that, and we should absolutely be focused on the safety of these vaccines, and that will be a point of no compromise at the end of the day. But the studies that are being done are substantial, tens of thousands of individuals. And I think we will get a good read on that safety. And then we need to introduce things. When you introduce new therapeutics, new vaccines, you need to have a decent system of pharmacovigilance. There may be unintended events that occur. But if you're not looking for them and you're not tracking them carefully, right, then you might not know that until it's far too late.
Right, and when you look at vaccines, also the issue is of equitable distribution. And the debate on this seems to be just beginning, and it's likely to get fiercer. What's your sense?
That's been our point of departure in all of the efforts over here: vaccines, the therapeutics, the diagnostics. which is that, we fundamentally believe that any of these tools and any of these opportunities that are available in wealthy countries need to be accessible to people everywhere on an equal basis. And there should not be a waiting line for access to these life-saving kinds of interventions. So on the vaccine front, I have to say India has been a tremendous contributor because of the strength of the vaccine industry. As you know, Gavi is the institution that we have invested in heavily to distribute vaccines to lower middle income countries, which I think has been quite a successful venture. And 70% of the vaccines that go through Gavi actually come from India. So, of course, when we were thinking about equitable access to vaccines, we turned, in the first instance to the very good Indian manufacturers.
Right.
And you would have seen some of the work we've been doing with Serum Institute of India, but also, the other manufacturers, BioE, Bharat Biotech, all have got very strong vaccine efforts now towards COVID-19. So we really can expect this, the supply that we need to address the equity issue, by and large, a lot of it to come from India.
Right. Just to come back to, you talked about the time taken and how we've gone from, start to roll out almost in barely 7 or 8 months. And the contrast with traditional or legacy diseases, including tuberculosis. So if we were to put in the same kind of firepower and investments, are you saying that we could find vaccines much faster for some of these traditional diseases?
I'm really hopeful of that. Often when you are attempting some new approach, let's say it's an mRNA approach for a vaccine which has not been tested before, then the first effort that you make often doesn't work out as you intended. It may not work as well and may need to be modified. So you often have to go back and you have to iterate. But if the loop of iteration is 5 or 6 years, then how many times can you do that? If the loop of iteration is less than 12 months, within a few years, we can have started with something and we can have progressed in these very difficult vaccine areas to a much better construct within that 5-year span. So it's all for innovation, I believe, in vaccines and in therapeutics as well. It's about iteration if you want to get that innovation practically into use.
And linked to that, how do we recalibrate our efforts? So let's say, vaccines begin to roll out first quarter next year, and maybe by middle or towards the third quarter of next year, 2021, there is some sense of control over this pandemic. How do we recalibrate our efforts or prepare to recalibrate to refocus on our traditional challenges, including all the ones that you've been fighting all these years, maybe including tuberculosis, malaria, and so on?
I think that's exactly our opportunity and our risk over here. So my nightmare would be that we say, well, we are starting again with any of the work that's been delayed on the other, let's say, the slow-moving epidemics that we have been working on, HIV, tuberculosis, malaria, and others. And we start again from where we left off in February of 2020. That would be a big mistake, because since February of 2020, we have learned a lot about how regulators, for instance, can jump in and can accelerate innovation, not in an unsafe way, but just by being available to companies for a real-time ongoing dialogue. So the company has an issue or the regulator has an issue. You can send a note to the company for a meeting in 2 months or 3 months, the usual kind of process, or there might be an immediate phone call to address the issue. That saves a huge amount of time. So just the interaction between regulators and the manufacturers and the companies to enhance innovation by improving that connection would in and of itself be transformational. So those are the kinds of events that have occurred now that we need to capture, and we need to set the expectation. This is the new normal standard. We're not going back to February of 2020.
Right. Last question. As a doctor yourself, though not a practicing one, What has your own learnings been from the way you've seen this disease progress, and frighteningly so, I guess? What are you looking out? And what do you? I mean, essentially, what's your personal journey been like right through this entire period?
It has been, I think, difficult for everybody in terms of the massive change of lifestyle, of interaction with people, the isolation that has come out of this. With my own group now, everybody distributed, working from home. I know people have struggled a lot. I'm not excluded even from that group. The amount, though, we've been able to accomplish and how we've learnt at the level of molecular biology of this infection, which has turned out to be vastly more complicated than anybody could have guessed at. What is emerging now is that you almost have these two phases in people who progress to more severe disease. An early phase may be driven by viral replication, but then a second phase that can emerge at some delay, where it's an autoimmune reaction more, and endogenous immune effects which become more prominent. And we've seen that with the effect of something as simple as dexamethasone, a steroid, which seems helpful in that later phase, but not helpful in the early phase. Now, none of these things we really knew before, but I think that the ability of the medical system to actually take these learnings and incorporate them into treatments and therapies, you've seen the death rate actually drop dramatically, not because we have some completely novel therapeutic, but just being able to put patients prone, for instance, and reduce the need to put people early onto ventilators. So there has been an acceleration of this learning being put into practice. To stand, on the sidelines and in some ways have some insights into what's going on is an amazing journey for a physician, to see that, an almost an entire career's worth of knowledge about a disease entity telescoped once again into this 8 months. Amazing and inspiring, at the same time as tragic for the consequences that have impacted so many people.
Right. Trevor Mundel, thank you very much for speaking with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.